Welcome to Inspirations Beauty Show. This podcast is not only to inspire you to achieve the skin of your dreams, but it's to teach you on how to care for your skin to get your dream skin a reality. Learn with me as I combine my inspirational and spiritual side along with my skin enthusiast and professional and educated mind. I'm your host, Danielle Cerrone, self-made skincare practitioner, certified esthetician, business owner, beauty blogger, and now Inspirations Beauty Show host. My intentions through this outlet is to educate you so that you know everything there is to know about skin and how to care for it. Not only will this podcast help spruce up your skincare routine and uncomplicate the beauty industry, but I'm here to help create you be your own skin master. Each episode will cover a topic to bring you closer to that master status. And the best thing is that this industry is always growing, so we will be learning a lot together. So are you ready? Let's go, inspirational beauties. It's learning time. Welcome back, everyone. I'm so glad to have you guys on Inspirations Beauty Show once again. And last week, I shed some light on how being happy can clear your skin and how things we experience create potential skin responses. Today, I'm taking you guys on an entirely different spin of skincare. It's actually a spin of self-care. It's a different spin that is important and actually really fun for me to share with you. I share this with you as a soul connection has been so big through my journey of accepting myself as an individual, but also accepting myself and my skin. That's the biggest thing here, acceptance. I thought since the last few episodes were all segueing into healthy habits of life as a whole and, the things that we should try to do and implement into our daily life. But the last few weeks have been a little bit more structured, where today I want to share a little bit more woo-woo with you that haven't been really sprinkled into episodes yet. I want to offer you a connection to someone who's really helped me. This lovely individual helped expand in myself in more ways than I can list, and I truly don't know how I could share it all. I don't have the time nor the words, to be honest. But since I'm a huge advocate for self-love, for creating routines, finding practices like journaling or meditation, and things all healing, I thought having her on the podcast would be a lovely way for you to feel the energy and receive some healing of your own. A lot of these conversations that I have with my clients are actually a lot about skin and the health of our skin and the routines we have in place and the products we use, but we don't really get too deep with the self-confidence or the deeper rooted issues of our insecurities. Although my place of clinic is a place that you can share your vulnerability and your desperation to feel complete and loved and accepted in your own body, today I thought there'd be a way that I can bridge that gap and create a wider space and a wider audience to be able to share a few things and to show you guys that you can relate to a lot of people. As I've shared, there's a few meditations that I've uploaded for you, and there's going to be more in the future. If there are ways that you can learn to implement self-care, self-love, and foster a relationship with ourselves, then why not? That will heal our skin. This will provide us with a new lens in ways that we can see our external shell, which is just our skin. So without further ado, I want to introduce you to this lovely guest, Inspirations Beauty Clinics and Beauty Show's third guest that we have on the podcast. This lady knocked my socks off, and I'm so excited for her to do the same thing for you. Martina is a vision and creation coach who uses curated copy, branding, and a bit of strategy and soul. She helps highly driven women embody their vision, creativity, and purposeful work. It's a little slightly woo-woo, but 100% genuine. And if I can add my own mini testimony, 100% worth it all. Everyone welcome Martina.
Hello. Thank you. That was such a lovely introduction. I'm so appreciative of that.
I'm so happy to have you on. I'm so excited for you to just share your light with so many people.
Yeah, I love everything that you brought up is so obviously aligned as it always is, right? So I think maybe let's just tap into how we like kind of met. We met actually through a meditation, which is really, really cool and powerful. I was delivering a meditation in the interweb, and Danielle happened to, land upon it. And so we just felt that connection within each other, and we worked together. I was a coach for Danielle for a period of time, and we really worked at helping to balance a lot of imbalances, but internal soul work. It's not all about the external. The external can be, unfortunately, a reflection of what's going on inside, right? So it's not always about putting the stuff on top. It's about looking inward. And that's the scary stuff to do. It's not fun stuff to do. But when you are able to meet yourself, the big thing here is the nervous system and how the nervous system can relax, tapping into the nervous system, but also nourishing the nervous system, whether that's balancing masculine and feminine energy. If you've ever chatted about that on here, I'm not sure, but that's something I definitely work with my clients on. However, the nervous system is a very intricate part of our body, mind, and soul. It's a huge connector piece and also a huge reflector piece of what's going on internally. So I like to look at absolutely everything going on: lifestyle, relationship, purposeful work, career, friends, family, all of that has an impact on yourself and your body. And yeah, it can speak to us through our skin.
Yeah, it absolutely can. And in the last episode, actually before this, when I talked a lot about, the sympathetic nervous system, the parasympathetic nervous system, and like how when we're in fight or flight, or we're in constant stress, we're in even turmoil internally, like I kind of said in the last episode, like journal what happens in your skin, whether it's a rash, a deeper wrinkle, a pigmentation. Like the body truly tries to get your attention in ways, because we can't speak. Well, we can talk to ourselves, but we can get our attention that in that kind of multifaceted way. So I did kind of mention that. So it's really cool that you kind of even just brought that up, because people often associate that with and not that that's bad, but so scientific and so bodily function, which absolutely, I'm not denying that whatsoever. But what I'm trying to do, and I know that you and I have discussed it, hence you being with us today, is how do we really identify, is it more of a internal battle that I'm actually suppressing? Or is it something that, even like I know you worked with me, it was like that idea of, okay, is this really detrimental for you to focus on? Or, how to create your priorities? Or a huge thing was creating that balance, as you mentioned, of pleasure and play and productivity. So having those kind of discussions, it's so interesting that I'm really trying to find the way to mend those, because if you are always go, 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 your body's in overdrive. Your body's in that sympathetic, like the freak out.
Yeah. Fight or flight.
Fight or flight. So yeah, I am so thankful that you touched on that. So what would be, if you don't mind me asking, like what would be like your 3 basic things if someone is like, okay, like that's me, like I'm perma stressed, and of course we'll go into like how they can work with you and things like that. But like, what would you be like, okay, here's how to connect to your soul. Like maybe this is where I'm trying to like ping, 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 like my hand is up, help me.
Yeah. Well, and I'll speak to my skin experience. I actually went through a period, I think it was about 2 years, where my entire body was covered in a rash. And it was, nobody could figure it out. Western, Eastern, all the things. And it was really due to overwhelming stress I had. That was leading to my imbalance. Hello, it's that chronic stress. And sometimes things cannot often be explained in a scientific way. There's no box for that, right? Like I don't fit into a box.
I am like, you guys can't see me, but I like my hands are up, because that's like truly a lot of what I even hear with skin. And what we'll dive into is like, everyone thinks that they're in this box, or, they've had acne. They are a person who has acne.
Yes.
Like it now is an identifying marker of that human. But you guys have to understand that you telling yourself that and believing that is creating a trauma response within your body.
Absolutely.
Your body is going to create more tension and more inflammation based off of a story and a narrative that you were told. And yes, it may be true. Your skin has acne, but why is it not you have acne? Or why isn't it your skin has acne versus you have acne.
Yeah.
Even as simple as changing the way that we as people can absorb the information. So I love that you said that box thing, because I think, yeah, like I feel like I could go on a tangent about not fitting in a box, because how true and real is that?
Well, and how unique are we? How unique are our traumas, our stress triggers? Like every single one of us has a different thing that's stressing us out, whether it's a pandemic or your kids or your dog or your partner. Every single one of us have a unique experience. So how can we look at everyone, or give the same protocol to the same person or every single person? It's impossible, right? And energy speaks through us, and I'm going to get into the woo-woo stuff, the energetics, but you know, an emotion and emotions are energy in motion. It has to come out of us somehow. So if you're not processing these things, your body will, your physical form, your physiological form is going to have to process it in some way. So that's why I love meditation. I love journaling. I love talk therapy. I love coaching, because it is a way for you to acknowledge yourself, process what you're processing or moving through, and let it come out. And also movement's huge too, right? Like going for a walk in the forest, walking your dog, doing an intense workout if that feels good for you. And so like these things have to get up and out of us, and if we don't, that's when we have those like emotional eruptions that are so stressful. And I was listening to another podcast or something the other day, and it was really interesting that people don't actually trust people who don't process their emotions, because they know on a subconscious level they're going to erupt at some point because they're not balanced, and you can feel that tension, you can feel that energy. And you're like, when is the shoe going to drop? Right. Whereas if someone cries it out, you're like, oh, I get it. Like they've moved through that. They're not going to take this stuff out on me. They're going to take it, they're going to work through it themselves. So, these tools, and everyone has different tools. It could be cleaning the kitchen for somebody, it could be going for a run for somebody else, and it could be sitting in meditation. It doesn't have to, again, look the exact same, but what you're doing ultimately is taking time, acknowledging, processing, moving through, and, allowing, right? The only way out is through. Unfortunately, we can't kind of force ourselves through these things, which is why we have this like epidemic of like chronic stress, right?
Yeah. And that was beautifully said. And it's so interesting, like when you say certain things, how I myself have tried to like articulate that. And then like you hear it from someone else and I'm like, yes, like this is it. So if you guys need to like go back, just re-listen to that part, because it's amazing, truly, like you said, like, and I think too, like what you taught me is a lot of it is kind of like a subconscious thing. Like we create, like for me, I create a lot of busy, or I create a lot of things. And it's actually like sitting with that and being like, okay, but like, is this serving me? Or is this a practice my skin enjoys? Like, I can name a million of them as they're popping in my head, but it's like even questioning that, what feels good for you and what sits well with your space and like the person you're evolving to or the person you're trying to become, right? Like everything can be so crazily interconnected.
Yeah, and I think another thing is also being okay that what you did 5 years ago doesn't have to be what you're doing now, and it might not be what you're doing a year from now. And just being a little bit more flexible and flowy in that some things change, like who you were when you were 21 versus having a child in your 30s, 40s, whatever. Like life is going to be different. Therefore, your routines are going to be different. What your values are going to be different. So I think we get really married to must wake up, must work out, must blah, 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 blah. And it's like, you know what? Right now I'm going through a divorce and this is not working. You know what I mean? Whatever life is throwing at you, being okay with shifting. And yeah, because these identities and these conditionings we have from life, society, parents, friends, family, schooling, can become, imprinted on us. And then when we don't accomplish them, we feel like a failure. We feel overwhelmed because we're not using any tools, because we're like, well, if I didn't use this one, well, now I've got nothing, because we're not being flexible and being like, oh, let me try something different or new or out of my comfort zone. Therefore, you feel like a failure. And now you're again back in that chronic stress because you haven't moved through, you haven't processed, you haven't acknowledged.
And I think that's the kicker too, is like not even just focusing on like where you were 5 years ago, but like even understanding the body, regardless if we're talking about, skin responses specifically or not. Like if you don't work through something, like I've had clients say like, oh, like, have you experienced a loss or like whatever, like you have a lot of redness in your cheeks. That's typically related to anger. Like, oh, well, that happened, 5 years ago or 10 years ago. And just because it's surfacing now doesn't mean that past issue, or even if it was a week ago, a day ago, the skin and the body and the tension, like notice it clenching your jaw, noticing it and in your body, because your body knows things before you know it. So
exactly,
it's that I think that was really important too, is like, it's not even just the habits you're so used to and the tools you had 5 years ago, but acknowledging that like, if you continue to not work on those things, like they can, I won't say will, but they can show up in our behaviors, in our habits, in our skin, in our health and wellness in general. So yeah, I'm really glad you touched on that part.
Yeah. And I think that, and I do have a background in holistic nutrition as well. I will say that. I forgot about that part, but let's forget about all these things I've done. But so that's why, like when I speak to these things, I know the physiological response and how stress can create so much more, like we said, in imbalance, but also inflammation. And like it screams at us in different ways. And the entire purpose is to create a preventative method versus like okay, here's a disease-based model. Now I have, let's say, diabetes. Now what do I do? Well, let's look at what's happening before we even get to that point, which is not always easy, right? Because we don't pay attention to those little cues our body is desperately trying to get our attention for. And it's not always skin. A lot of the time it's skin, because that's a huge organ, right? To expel and shed and release and like, sweat, whatever, excrete is the word I was looking for. So when we can't,
like window to our inside, like it's literally that clean shield that like you can, like, it's literally the window being like, hi, like I'm here.
Yeah. Yeah. And even as those who identify as females, like, hello, hormones, like, you know what I mean? Such a reflection of that as well. So, and that changes throughout life, like from, the time we start our cycle to well and past that as well. So being okay with your body also not being the same and changing. And like you said, if there was a trauma that happened 10 years ago, you may have also blocked that from your subconscious in a mode of survival. So it could show up 20 or 5 years from now through your skin, like if you haven't moved, again, done a little bit of that digging work to go, hey, I forgot about that. Or like, I keep getting triggered by my partner when they say this. Why is that? Like having that awareness, a little bit of awareness that can come through other triggers that could lead to your physiological triggers.
Yeah. And this is kind of a little bit off topic, but still somehow related, is even in that changing of body process and like not processing that correctly or not accepting yourself at that point, or a few things like that. Like, for example, if a person has had a C-section, there's a lot of inflammation within the tissue and within the body. A lot of the time that's actually caused or linked, I should say, correct that to linked to a lot of inflammation in the chest, the neck, and the jawline. Wow. So even though that happened, let's just say your child is now 5, that doesn't mean that those tissues haven't fully healed. So even though that's so internal, right? That's an internal trauma, that's something that's happened, but even maybe it's on top of not accepting where your body, like on top of other things, like there are things that happen throughout life. That's one example. Another is if you're constantly anxious and you're constantly having your respiratory, so you're not breathing properly, you're not actually getting those deeper breaths, or you're carrying all that tension, that's a huge thing for a lot of inflammation, typically the cheek, like essentially from the cheekbone down to your jaw. So, and that's respiratory. So you have to also like kind of unravel that part where it's like, that part leads to lack of acceptance from whatever. And then it's unfortunately that trickle effect that we think, oh, we have acne, this is the identification marker. Oh, I've had this trauma, that's my identification marker. Versus like working through why that trauma is carrying a heavy space in our body, or why that, you know, that term acne or inflammation or rose, like whatever it is carrying that weight, and moving through that weight, I think is really cool. And maybe I should start working with you to have those conversations with clients, because that's what I feel I have a lot of, is I want to be like the amount of times I have literally like put my hands and just like looked at them and be like, you're beautiful. Like, can you just believe that? Like, can you just believe that? Or like, your acne doesn't define you. Like, I remember the first time I said that to a client, I looked at her and I said, your acne doesn't define you. She literally broke down and cried.
Of course. I can imagine. Yeah.
And I didn't realize at the time that saying that would have that kind of profound, and that was a 2 or so years ago, I would say, maybe longer now. But I remember that was like, oh, there's more to this.
Yeah.
Like it got me down that, okay, there's
and if you think of our skin, unfortunately, it's that external thing that everyone meets, right? Or sees for the first time. And so there's a huge worthiness component to that, because when you do not feel confident in your external body and image, of course, you're going to have that little bit of contraction and like not feel, you know, like opening up to people and being vulnerable and showing up as your most confident self. And I'm not to say that anyone who has acne doesn't feel that way, because they could. However, I'm just saying that in your example, when they broke down, I can feel that. Like, you don't feel worthy because you have these markers on your face, you know, like literally, like here's a mark on my face that by society standards is deemed not worthy and ugly and yuck and whatever. However, it's like you could show up in that way and still have that internal alignment and rooted in such a devotion to your rootedness and in worthiness that it wouldn't matter, right? But I guess you wouldn't come to a skincare clinic if you felt that way, right? You would, you know, and who knows if that acne would still be present. There, of course, is a physiological reason to some things. However, I find it's always just so much deeper. It's truly this mind, body, soul, like I call it the trifecta. Like you cannot have one without the other. Like I just truly don't believe that.
Yeah. And I think that's the cool part too, like even working with you and having these circumstances kind of like in conversations that I've started to have with clients that really make that more real. Like I always knew that and I always felt that. But it's like I said, even just a few moments ago, of like when you have this idea or this understanding, but you can't quite put it to words. That's kind of how I feel right now with my involvement of my business and where I want it to go, is because I've had a few little drops and little hints of like, this is bigger than what meets the eye, literally. And it's really like opening those conversations with people. And I think that's why having this avenue was like such a necessary thing, because it can be those conversations. And even in my last episode, I said, even if you don't fully grasp or understand, it's important to have these type of dialogues and these type of openness vessels so that you can just hear it. And then maybe that allows you to have a conversation with someone else, or maybe it triggers an enlightenment of another, something that maybe you didn't think was related to your skin or was related to your anxiety. Like maybe it just opens up that wheelhouse to allow things to hit at a different place, you know? And I think that's also too, it's just so cool with like I said, conversations I've had with my clients, that when I ask certain things, like I've had a few funny looks of like, well, yes, like I do this, or like, yes, I clench my jaw, or like, yes, I have anxiety, like who, not at a doctor. Like they kind of get this like uncomfortableness. And well, that in itself is a whole other issue, but like they don't understand. And then once you kind of really hone in, you're like, your body's a working unit that intertwine, like has a connection. They all of a sudden go, yeah, that I guess logically makes sense.
Yeah.
They take away, like you said, because we're seen as this shell and it's all appearance based, we forget that our exterior is actually our protective of everything that's stuffed inside of us.
Absolutely. And I think that there's a huge permission slip too there. Like also when you open up to somebody else and you're like, oh, or like they see you and they hear you, and then you have this kind of reflection back and going, oh, like I can look at myself as something deeper than just my skin. I can, look at the entirety of the picture. And like you said, I call it like a meat suit, right? Like it's this thing, this like body that is storing all of the years, the trauma, the experiences, beautiful and not, so it's a huge permission slip, especially if you've even been witness to somebody else who has done that as well. You're like, oh, and like you can see in their growth and you can see in their evolution as well. And maybe they've moved through acne or a skin issue and you're like, oh, how did they do that? Let's explore that and, find the ways in which. And so when you're labeling like tight jaw and like, how does that play? What's stressing you out? It's so much more than, again, like you said, what meets the eye.
Yeah. It kind of led me to this, and it's totally okay if you don't want to share this. I'm just curious, just based off of like talking with clients and things I've noticed with their skin. Is there anything that you've noticed with your skin that happens if something's going on in your world? My example is if I don't feel heard or I've been in a disagreement, I often break out like 2 or 3, and I've shared this so this isn't new to many people, but it will be a few breakouts kind of linear on my neck to jawline. And that's always if I don't feel heard or like I've been in an argument or I'm suppressing something that needs to be said. Have you noticed anything that's like linked to have you noticed?
Absolutely. Yes. Cool. I was very much living out of my own alignment at the time that I was going through the skin stuff, and I didn't put 2 and 2 together at the time. And I was living for someone else, and their care and their well-being and not taking care of my own. And it was literally like my body was like, hello, like I couldn't even lift my arms above the head without the skin like cracking. And it was awful. I can't even explain it. And even, pardon?
I said, oh my word.
Yeah, I couldn't work. Like I had to even just lie there with like ice packs on my body. So it was literally like also your body forcing you to be like, slow down, don't do anything, have some time to reflect on what's going on deeper. Right. And so I noticed that, and it did take 2 years. It did take a lot. I did a couple like internal cleanses. Obviously I'm a holistic nutritionist, so I don't recommend cleanses just to do them without some support. But it was, it's cleansing the mindset too, right? It's cleansing so much more than just the physiological body. However, it was very, very much when I was living out of alignment, for sure.
Yeah. And I asked, and I feel like I should start asking this more to people, only because, again, this conversation's quite, I would say, new publicly, not new in the sense that this is not new information to a lot of people. It's just not shared. So I asked because I think it'd be cool for someone to be listening and, whether it's, they can relate to mine or yours or something that's like, oh, wow, like actually every time that this happens, I do get this, like to have people start identifying. And that's where I always like joke. I'm like, like food log, you can skin log, like emotion log, like do it all. So yeah, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, 100%. And just to add on that, just because I used to work with people and their digestive system and food, and when they'd have, an episode, like let's say a migraine, I'd say like, well, what happened in the last 18 to 24 hours? What did you eat? What, email was sent to you? What argument with your partner was had? What difficulty with your child? Like, it's not always just one thing. It can be a multitude of things. And so to log that stuff is huge, to log when the skin was, like I called it erupting, basically, because I did have to look at my diet. I did have to look at like my stress triggers. I did have to look at what even I was digesting in terms of like social media and, you know, the news and like all of that stuff. Right. So if you look at all of those things, you know, I even had a client recently who, every morning she'd wake up with anxiety. And I said, well, what are you doing? She goes, I wake up, I put the TV on. I was like, you're putting the news on first thing in the morning and you're wondering why you're having anxiety. But she's done that for 40 years, you know? And so she stopped doing that and she goes, oh my God. And I'm like, yeah, you know? So it's these practices that we even have done for our entire lives that we don't realize have had an impact on ourselves and our bodies.
Yeah. And that goes back again to just because you did it 5 years ago, 40 years ago, whatever, doesn't mean it's still suiting you now. And it's funny you say that because like literally I said that about skincare. Like just because you used it in high school doesn't mean that it's good for your skin now. Your skin changes, you know, like it's so funny. But even as silly as that example is, it just goes to show you that like we can also get so comfortable in something that's maybe not serving us without even without even digging deep to be like, is this what I need right now? Is this what my skin needs right now?
And that's like almost like being in relation with your skin, right? And it's your skin needs growth, your self needs growth. And if you're just doing the same thing over and over again, well, there's no growth there, right?
Yeah. That's so, I'm writing that down. Your skin needs growth and your soul needs growth. It's so true.
Yes, exactly. I love it.
I wondered if you were willing to kind of take us through a meditation. Whatever you feel called to do, I'll give you no structure, just kind of lead us the way.
Absolutely.
At this time, then they can kind of digest everything that we've just chatted about, kind of let that land wherever, as you say, let that land where it needs to land. And which I've actually taken, by the way, coined your
I love it.
So yeah, and I think that, and I've done this in a few episodes too, is just, again, bringing that awareness to what's going on and giving ourselves a breather, like giving ourselves that permission slip to actually tap out a little bit, because through these things, if you guys are new to meditation, don't worry at all. Like just kind of sit and let your mind take you where you need to go. Things might pop up in your brain that like are an aha moment. You might not feel anything, but tomorrow, I like how you just said that too, is because sometimes, you know, maybe they'll listen to this meditation, then tomorrow they'll have an aha moment or a feeling. And I think it's really important for you guys to know to even identify that and even log that, because that could help, or even your skin will heal after a meditation or things like that. You'll notice a blemish is less angry, those type of things. Really take note of those things because they are important.
Yeah. And I will say before we start is just even meditation has been known to reduce inflammation because we're reducing our level of stress, right? Again, supporting the nervous system. So huge. If you can almost use that as like a reminder, like, oh, maybe I'll do a 2-minute meditation to reduce a little bit of redness, right? So yeah. All right. So I will say you can do this seated, you can do this lying down. If you want any like cushions, blankets, make this super, super cozy. If you want to light a candle, put some, pause this, of course, before you guys begin, put some essential oils on or an incense or anything to make it really, I call it vibey or beautiful and cozy, just so that you can experience this the best possible way. And then whether you're lying down or seated, just having the spine long. And I recommend if you're seated, even just having the spine supported. So get some cushions to lean against, or a wall or a chair or couch. And as you settle in, allowing the eyes to shut down, feeling the hips get heavier, feeling the body just let go. We have this small percentage of ourselves that doesn't often want to allow us to let go. Can you just invite your body to soften? And then bringing some awareness to your belly space. Taking a deep breath in, allowing the belly to expand like a balloon. Big exhale, sigh out through the mouth. And again, deep inhalation, breathing into the belly, breathing into the chest and lungs, filling up your entire body. Exhale, sigh out. And you can take a few more of those cleansing belly breaths, or move into more of a nostril breathing in and out through the nose, giving yourself permission to nourish your mind, your body, your soul. Reminding yourself also that you are worthy of this time. You are worthy of taking time for yourself out of your chaotic, busy day. This is your divine birthright, is to have moments of peace and calm and inner connection. Soften your forehead, your temples, your cheeks, your jaw, and your tongue. Even relaxing your teeth and your ears. Acknowledging anything that comes up in your mind. Just bringing some awareness to it. Maybe even saying thank you. And setting it aside for the moment. Thinking and thoughts are okay. This is a time to acknowledge and process, but remembering that you are also in charge. Your thoughts do not define you. If you find that your mind tends to race and wander, maybe saying to yourself, simply breathe in and breathe out. And we will take that into practice for just a few moments of silence as we focus on the breath. Starting to slowly deepen the breath, bringing some attention back, maybe into your belly space as you expand and contract the belly, landing back in your body, feeling the clothing against your skin, your support system underneath you, cushions, blankets. Just starting to slowly sense your external environment, the room within you, maybe even the city that you're in, the country, the planet, allowing yourself to be grounded within it. We're going to flutter our eyes open, but just looking past your nostrils or just looking past your nose. And then slowly bringing the gaze up to the horizon as you take in your room. Not rushing off, not grabbing your phone, not making any massive movements, but just taking a moment for yourself here. Welcome back. Thank you for doing that practice with me too.
Thank you. That was lovely. I really hope everyone got the best out of that.
Yes, I hope so too. And also just noting that if this is your first time meditating and like lots of things were happening and coming up, that's okay. It's just because you've given yourself a moment to actually check in. And sometimes we tend not to do that and not to allow for these moments, right? Meditation is a time of processing. It's not about a completely clear mind all the time and blank slate. And it is about actually spending time within the self.
Yeah, and that's when all the healing happens. Like you said at the beginning, it's not always the easy work or the work we want to do, but the work that's calling us to do, right? So yeah,
Exactly.
Thank you so much for that. So before we close up here, one last question. I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. What I've been asking the few guests I've already had here is, what one thing that makes you internally beautiful and one thing that makes you externally beautiful?
Oh, okay. Like kind of like a practice that I would do, I guess, or
it can be anything, like however you interpret it. So like I would say my internal beauty is I'm compassionate, and my external beauty is I love my blue eyes.
Beautiful. Okay. And I agree with both of those things too. I would say my internal beauty, I will connect to compassion, but I also think this year I've really anchored into my knowing. And I think when you're anchored into your internal knowing and truth, like there's no way that can't shine through and it becomes like your external, right? And I guess external, like physical part, everyone's always said I've had great hair. So
I would totally agree with that.
Thank you.
Like one of the first things I commented on the video.
Oh.
Thank you for sharing that. And I think it's kind of cutesy and funny. And I think I haven't done this before, but I want the listeners to also ask themselves that. So like, it's also a question that we don't ask ourselves, but not a lot of people ask us, like, hey, like, what do you love about yourself? You know, like, where's that reflection? So you guys, after that meditation, you know, if that really sunk in, maybe even journal and ask yourself what you love about yourself, because that's a form of gratitude as well. And maybe it seems less intimidating and more of a love little note to yourself, which is wonderful.
I think also before, just even like if someone says something to you, being able to receive that. Like not deflecting it and not like, oh, well, this is beautiful about you. And it's like, can you just receive, you know? Yeah. And that's a practice in worthiness as well, not just avoid, you know, that almost like avoiding like and reflecting back immediately. Like just take a moment and actually like acknowledge that person just gave you a beautiful compliment.
Yeah, that's so true. I do that a lot actually. And I notice that my clients do as well. Or we almost say, oh, really? Think so? Like I didn't do anything with my hand. Like they downplay
this whole thing. Yeah. So just saying thank you and like practicing leaving at thank you. And it's going to feel weird and uncomfortable at first, but just that's it.
So where can people find you? I'm going to put this in the show notes as well. But just in case maybe they're on their phones right now, where can they give you a follow? Where can they find you? How can they work with you?
Yeah. So I hang out on Instagram the most. So my handle, and again, you'll put that in the show notes, is just Martina Biljan, my first and last name, one line. So that's typically where I hang out, where I do post about my offerings and my coaching, and I'm moving more into a creative part of my business. So creation and vision coach and copywriting and branding.
Amazing. So if you guys, which you should want to go check her out, give her a follow. You can even probably see her more on here, hopefully. Thank you so much for your time. It was such a good conversation. And I really hope that it just touched one other soul today that got, the fire lit in their mind, and maybe even more of a connection to themselves, and that they can start their own healing journey, whether it's internally or externally or anything like that. So thank you so much for sharing the space with us today.
Of course. You're so welcome. Thank you so much for having me.
So everyone listening, I will see you next week, and stay internally and externally beautiful, all you inspirational beings. Take care.